It was an unusually quiet day in the courtroom. The crowd, a mix of reporters, legal experts, and curious spectators, sat in anticipation. The case they were about to witness was one of the most talked about legal battles in recent memory. Elon Musk, the billionaire tech mogul known for changing the world with companies like Tesla and SpaceX, was sitting at the defense table, looking calm and collected. Despite his reputation for being bold and daring in the business world, Musk was now facing a different kind of challenge. In the courtroom, he was just like any other defendant, at the mercy of the law. And yet, as he sat there, no one could ignore the tension in the air. The judge, an experienced and no-nonsense figure, took his seat at the front of the courtroom. His stern expression revealed nothing of what he was thinking. He had seen many high-profile cases in his career, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the presence of Elon Musk himself, or perhaps it was the strange aura that surrounded the case. Whatever it was, the judge seemed unfazed. His confidence in handling the situation was clear. Musk sat upright, his hands resting on the table. His face gave away no emotion, but inside he could feel the weight of the moment. He had dealt with critics, the media, and controversies before, but this was something new. He had always prided himself on his ability to think quickly on his feet, but here, in this courtroom, the stakes were higher than ever. As the trial began, the judge wasted no time in addressing the situation. He looked at Musk with a slight grin and made a remark that caught everyone's attention. "Mr. Musk, I hope you've come prepared for this battle. It's not every day that someone with your resources steps into my courtroom," the judge said with a chuckle. Musk raised an eyebrow, not reacting outwardly, but feeling a shift in the atmosphere. The judge's words seemed dismissive, almost as if he were implying that Musk's wealth and influence wouldn't make a difference in this room. It was as if the judge was making it clear, "I don't care who you are. In this courtroom, I hold the power." The audience, who had been quietly watching, exchanged knowing looks. They had heard about Musk's reputation, his quick thinking, and his ability to get things done against all odds. Some wondered how he would handle the judge's tone. Would he respond with his usual sharp wit, or would he remain silent and let the case unfold? But it wasn't just the judge's words that sent a ripple through the courtroom. It was the way he said them. The subtle smirk that appeared on his face after his remark suggested he didn't believe Musk could outsmart him in the legal arena. The judge, clearly underestimating Musk, seemed ready to dismiss him as just another high-profile individual who thought he could buy his way out of trouble. Musk sat still, his eyes fixed on the judge, but his mind was racing. He knew that in this room, his usual business tactics and tech-savvy skills wouldn't work. This was a legal battle, and he would have to play by their rules. The tension between the two men, the judge's arrogance and Musk's quiet determination, filled the room. The judge continued to address the case with a tone that suggested he already had his mind made up. He spoke as if he knew how things would unfold. He didn't seem worried. After all, he had years of experience and a track record of handling the most difficult cases. The courtroom was his domain, and he was in control. But something about the way Musk sat there, calm and composed, made the judge uneasy. Was Musk really just a businessman with no understanding of the law? Or was there something deeper, something more strategic at play? The judge had no idea that the man sitting across from him wasn't someone who was easily intimidated, no matter how high the stakes. As the judge continued his remarks, the audience leaned in, sensing that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Would the judge's underestimation of Musk turn into a huge mistake? Would the tech mogul be able to outwit him in ways no one expected? The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Musk's quiet confidence contrasted sharply with the judge's dismissive attitude. Neither side seemed willing to give an inch, and it was clear that this was going to be a battle of wills, one that would leave everyone wondering who would come out on top. As the first round of the case progressed, no one knew yet how it would end. But one thing was for sure. The judge had no idea just how much trouble he might be in. Musk had come prepared, and the legal bombshell that was about to drop would change everything. The courtroom was heavy with anticipation as the judge continued his questioning, his voice steady and filled with confidence. He hadn't yet realized what he was up against. Musk remained unmoved, his expression still and impassive, but in his mind, a plan was already forming. The initial tension had given way to something quieter, something far more dangerous. Musk's silence wasn't born from nervousness or uncertainty. It was a calculated move. He knew better than anyone that sometimes the best way to win a battle was not by charging in immediately, but by waiting, listening, and studying your opponent. The judge, with his dismissive attitude, had already underestimated him, something Musk was about to turn into his greatest advantage. The judge, still confident that his experience would carry him through, pressed on. He seemed eager to make an example of the billionaire tech mogul, believing that Musk's wealth and status would crumble under the weight of the law. But what the judge didn't understand was that Musk wasn't just any businessman. He had faced impossible odds before and come out on top, time and time again. What seemed like a simple legal case to the judge was, in fact, a chess match for Musk. The judge's tone grew sharper as he continued to question Musk, hoping to provoke a response, to force him into a defensive position. But Musk didn't take the bait. He simply listened, absorbing every word. Every subtle shift in the judge's posture, every raised eyebrow, and every sarcastic remark was being filed away in Musk's mind. He was learning more about his opponent with every passing second. The tension was rising again. Musk could feel it, the simmering pressure in the air as everyone waited for the next move. The audience, sensing the power struggle unfolding before them, held their breath. They could see the clash of personalities, the battle of wills, but they had no idea what Musk was preparing in response. Then, just as the judge began to speak again, something changed in the room. It was almost imperceptible at first, a subtle shift in Musk's posture. His shoulders straightened ever so slightly, and his hands, which had been resting calmly on the table, moved just enough for everyone in the room to notice. The change wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to signal that the game was about to shift. The judge, still with his confident smirk, continued to speak, unaware of the storm that was quietly brewing. "Mr. Musk," the judge said with a raised eyebrow, "you seem to think you can outsmart the system, but this is my courtroom, and in my courtroom, the rules are simple. No one is above the law." Musk's gaze didn't waver. His voice was calm, measured, but there was a quiet confidence in his words that made the judge pause. "I don't need to outsmart anyone, Your Honor. I'm just here to do what's right. I understand the law better than you might think," Musk said, his tone respectful but firm. The judge raised an eyebrow, surprised by the subtle shift in Musk's demeanor. Was it arrogance? Or was Musk truly that confident? The judge couldn't decide, but one thing was clear. The dynamic in the room had changed. Musk leaned forward slightly, breaking his usual stillness. "You're right about one thing," he continued. "This is your courtroom, and I respect that. But I also believe in the power of facts. The truth will come out, and no amount of intimidation or mockery is going to change that." The audience shifted in their seats. There was a palpable shift in the room's energy as Musk's words sank in. It wasn't just the content of his response. It was the way he had delivered it. Calm, measured, but with a sense of quiet authority that had left the judge suddenly uncertain of his own position. The judge paused, clearly thrown off by Musk's unexpected response. For a moment, the judge's smirk faltered, his confidence wavering. He quickly regained his composure, but the effect was clear. Musk had planted a seed of doubt in the judge's mind, and the audience could feel it. The stakes were higher now, and everyone in the room knew that this was far from over. Musk sat back in his chair, his hands resting once again on the table, his expression as unreadable as ever. He knew that his words had struck a nerve. He hadn't made any flashy statements or bold claims. He had simply acknowledged the truth, and in doing so, he had shown that the judge's mockery wouldn't go unchallenged. For a moment, There was a strange silence in the courtroom, as if everyone were waiting for the next move. The judge, visibly rattled, glanced down at his papers, trying to regain control of the situation. He wasn't sure how to respond. Musk had caught him off guard in a way that few people ever did. But the real shock was still to come. The courtroom, once filled with the subtle noise of papers shuffling and whispers, fell completely silent. The judge, who had been so certain of his control over the proceedings, sat at his bench, his gaze flickering between the papers before him and the defendant across the room. Musk's quiet confidence had thrown him off balance, but the judge wasn't about to show weakness. He would regain control, he thought, and finish this case on his terms. The air was thick with tension, and the audience watched as the judge prepared to make his next move. He glanced at the defense team, then back at Musk, ready to press forward. Musk, however, remained still, his gaze unshaken. But this time, something in his eyes revealed that he was no longer playing the same game. He had been waiting, biding his time, and now the moment had arrived. "Mr. Musk," the judge said, his voice a little firmer than before, "you seem to believe that the law is something you can bend to your will. But in my court, things are done by the book. And if you think you can sidestep that, I'm afraid you're mistaken." There was a pause. The judge waited, expecting Musk to retreat, to offer some form of apology or correction. But instead, Musk slowly stood up, the room seeming to hold its breath as he took the floor. His movements were deliberate and controlled, a stark contrast to the tension that had been building in the room. "Your Honor," Musk began, his voice cutting through the silence, "I've always been someone who believes in progress, in innovation, but I also understand the importance of rules. The law exists to protect people, to ensure fairness. I respect that, but sometimes the law doesn't move fast enough. And sometimes the law fails to recognize that the world is changing." The judge blinked, clearly unsure of how to respond. What Musk was saying wasn't wrong, but it wasn't exactly what he wanted to hear. This wasn't a speech about his legal strategy or defense. It was a statement about the law itself, about the pace of change, and about how the rules often struggle to keep up with the modern world. Musk's words weren't arrogant. They were thought-provoking. But they were also a challenge. "I understand that this case might seem unconventional," Musk continued, his voice steady. "But the truth is, we are standing on the precipice of something far bigger than all of us, and sometimes the system isn't prepared for the challenges we face. That's why, Your Honor, I'm not just here to defend myself. I'm here to bring something new into this courtroom, a new way of thinking, a way that recognizes the changing times." A murmur passed through the courtroom, and the judge's eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected Musk to approach the case in this way. He had expected the usual deflection, the typical legal back and forth, but Musk wasn't playing by those rules. Musk was turning the courtroom into a battleground of ideas, not just legal arguments. "What do you mean by that, Mr. Musk?" the judge asked, his voice laced with both curiosity and suspicion. He couldn't help but wonder if Musk was trying to manipulate the court, to use his influence to bend the case to his will. Musk's eyes flicked briefly to his legal team before looking back at the judge. "I'm here to tell you that I'm not the one breaking the law, Your Honor," he said calmly, his words weighted with purpose. "I'm here because I've been following the rules, but the rules themselves are outdated. I've seen it firsthand. And now I'm going to show you how the law can be used to create, to innovate, to protect, not just to punish." The judge's expression tightened as he realized what Musk was getting at. This wasn't just a simple legal defense. This was a challenge to the very foundation of how the law viewed innovation and progress. It was clear that Musk wasn't just trying to win this case. He was trying to shift the conversation, to force the courtroom to recognize the challenges of the modern world and how they couldn't always be solved by old laws. But the true shock came when Musk reached into his briefcase, pulling out a thick folder filled with documents. "Your Honor," he said, "I've done the work. I've gathered the evidence, And what I'm about to show you will change the way we approach cases like this. It will prove that the law doesn't have to be a barrier to progress. It can be a tool for it. The judge's eyes widened as Musk laid the folder down on the table and opened it. The documents inside were meticulously organized, each page a detailed analysis of the current legal framework versus the realities of modern business practices. Musk had prepared an in-depth case study, one that combined legal precedent with innovative thinking, demonstrating how current laws were not only out of date, but actively hindering progress in industries like technology, space exploration, and clean energy. For the first time since the trial had begun, the judge looked unsettled. He hadn't expected Musk to come at him with such a calculated move. He had expected deflection or a weak defense, not this. The judge flipped through the documents, scanning the pages, his brow furrowing with each turn. The audience, holding their breath, could sense the shift. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a clash of ideologies, a battle of minds. Musk leaned back in his chair, his hands folded calmly in front of him. "I'm not asking you to agree with me, Your Honor," Musk said quietly. "But I am asking you to consider this. Are we going to let the law hold us back, or are we going to let it evolve?" The judge looked up from the papers, his expression changing. It wasn't just surprise he felt. It was uncertainty. For the first time in this case, Musk had the upper hand. The courtroom was eerily quiet. The weight of what had just unfolded hung in the air. For the first time in the trial, the judge seemed unsure. His fingers tapped nervously on the bench as he sifted through the documents Musk had provided. He had been trained to expect certain things in his courtroom: shifting arguments, the usual legal tricks, maybe even some last-minute surprises. But what Musk had just presented wasn't something he could easily dismiss. Musk's move had been bold, almost audacious. He hadn't just answered questions or defended his actions. He had challenged the system itself. The documents Musk had presented were not just legal precedents, but a well-thought-out critique of how the law needed to evolve in response to modern innovations. His argument wasn't that he had broken the law. It was that the law itself was outdated, failing to recognize the rapid pace of technological advancement. The judge looked up, his face tight with a mix of frustration and confusion. He wasn't used to being caught off guard, especially not by a defendant. The power dynamics in the room had shifted. The smirk he had once worn was now replaced with a furrowed brow. He wasn't sure how to proceed. "Mr. Musk," the judge said, his voice quieter now, almost contemplative, "I don't think I need to remind you that this courtroom operates under established laws. And no matter how you frame your argument, they're not going to change overnight. You may have a lot of facts, but this is not the place to make sweeping reforms to the system." Musk remained calm, his expression unchanged. He had known the judge would push back. He had anticipated it. But Musk was ready. "I understand that, Your Honor," he replied evenly. "I'm not asking for overnight change. But I believe the facts speak for themselves. These laws were written in a different time, a time when the world moved slower. Today, technology is moving faster than we can keep up. If the law doesn't evolve with it, then we risk stifling progress, holding back everything from business to science to space exploration." The judge didn't reply immediately. Instead, he stared at Musk, trying to assess whether he was being manipulated or whether there was some truth in what Musk was saying. It was a difficult position. Musk wasn't just another wealthy man using his resources to avoid consequences. He was presenting a well-reasoned argument that went beyond his own case. It made the judge uneasy, and that unease grew as Musk continued to speak. "You might not see it now," Musk said, his voice steady but filled with conviction, "but the world is changing. And if we don't adjust, we're going to be left behind." The courtroom was still. The judge's gaze moved from Musk to the documents on the table, flipping through the pages, clearly trying to understand the implications of what he was reading. There was no denying the depth of Musk's argument. He had carefully outlined how current laws were hindering progress in various industries: SpaceX's goals, Tesla's mission, and Musk's vision for sustainable energy had all been held back by the limitations of outdated regulations. Musk wasn't just talking about his case, he was talking about the future. The audience in the courtroom seemed to feel the shift as well. There was a murmur among them, as if they were witnessing something far bigger than just a legal battle. Musk had done something unexpected. He had turned this courtroom into a stage for a larger conversation, one about the future of law and progress. The judge, who had once been so confident in his authority, now found himself in a position where he had to seriously consider what Musk was saying. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the judge spoke again, his voice lower than before. "Mr. Musk, I won't pretend that I don't see the merit in some of your arguments. But the law is the law, and I can't let personal ideologies influence my decisions." Musk nodded, as if he had expected this response. "I understand, Your Honor. I'm not asking you to abandon the law. I'm asking you to look at it with fresh eyes. Sometimes, the law needs to adapt to the times. If we keep doing things the way we always have, we risk losing what makes us great as a society." The judge seemed to contemplate Musk's words, his gaze distant. For a moment, it almost seemed like he was seeing the case in a new light. The room was thick with the weight of the moment. The legal system, once seen as an immovable force, was now being questioned, right in front of the judge's eyes. Musk's argument was powerful, not just because it challenged the judge's authority, but because it reflected the real-world consequences of a legal system that couldn't keep up with technological progress. He wasn't trying to excuse himself. He was pushing for change that could benefit not just himself, but society as a whole. The judge had to admit, at least to himself, that this wasn't just about a man trying to avoid punishment. Musk was fighting for something larger. The judge shifted in his seat, looking at the documents again, his fingers running over the pages as he absorbed Musk's points. The audience waited, breathless, as the power struggle continued to unfold. Would the judge remain unshaken, or would Musk's unexpected legal strategy force him to rethink his stance? Finally, the judge stood, his gaze fixed on Musk. The room held its breath, waiting for the next move. "You've made your case, Mr. Musk," the judge said slowly, his tone more thoughtful than before. "And I will consider it. But make no mistake, this is my courtroom, and I will make my decision based on the law." But even as he said the words, there was something in his voice that suggested the battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. The courtroom had just witnessed a shift in power. The judge wasn't in control anymore, at least not completely. The courtroom was tense. The judge had just acknowledged that Musk's argument had merit, but the real question was how much weight that would hold in his final decision. Musk had shaken the judge's confidence, and the audience felt the shift. The silence that filled the room was heavy with anticipation. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Musk had made his point, but it wasn't just about winning this case anymore. It was about making the system see the need for change. The judge stood up, his expression still pensive. His fingers traced the edges of the papers in front of him as he took a deep breath. The weight of the moment was not lost on him. He had heard countless cases before, but this one was different. Musk wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for something bigger. And for a moment, the judge wondered if he could be the one to bring that change. "Musk, you've made a compelling argument," the judge said finally, his voice steady but thoughtful. "But I still have to follow the law, no matter what the circumstances are." Musk sat forward, never losing his calm demeanor. He had known this would come. It wasn't about forcing the judge to rule in his favor. It was about challenging the outdated structure that kept everyone in line. Musk wasn't afraid to push boundaries. In fact, he thrived on it. "I understand, Your Honor," Musk said, his voice cool and confident. "And I don't expect you to break the law for me. But I'm asking you to consider the bigger picture. The law is meant to serve the people and protect them. It shouldn't be something that stifles progress. If it's holding back innovation, then it's not working as intended." There was a long pause. The judge considered Musk's words. The arguments had shifted in such a way that he couldn't just dismiss them as the usual legal back and forth. Musk had touched on something fundamental: how laws, which were meant to safeguard society, were sometimes working against the very progress they were designed to protect. The audience, still seated in stunned silence, sensed the change. They could feel that this wasn't just a regular courtroom drama. This was a turning point. It was as if the entire system of law and order was being called into question by one man, a man who had the vision and the audacity to take on the system itself. The crowd couldn't look away. They were witnessing history in the making. Then the judge did something that no one expected. He leaned back in his chair and took off his glasses. His hand rested on the bench as he slowly let out a breath. "I'm not going to make my ruling today," the judge said, his voice calm but with a hint of uncertainty. "I need time to consider what you've said. I need to think about it, not just for this case, but for the future. You've made me rethink a few things, Mr. Musk." Musk nodded, his expression unchanged. He knew this was a victory in itself. The judge was no longer dismissing him. He was listening, and that was all Musk needed: a chance to be heard. "I appreciate your willingness to listen, Your Honor," Musk said. "I'm not here to challenge the system, but to show that there's a way forward that benefits us all. Sometimes it takes an outsider to see what the insiders can't." The judge looked at him for a moment, his eyes narrowing in thought. "I can't promise you anything, Mr. Musk," he said finally, a hint of respect in his voice, "but I will take your arguments into account." As the judge stood and the courtroom began to clear, there was a palpable shift in the air. The legal battle was far from over, but Musk had done something remarkable. He had planted a seed of doubt in the mind of a man who had once been so certain of his authority. The judge wasn't just going to rule on the law now. He was going to have to confront the reality that maybe, just maybe, the law needed to change. Outside the courtroom, the whispers began. People were talking about what had just happened. This was no longer just about one man's case. It was about a larger question of whether the law could keep up with the rapid pace of change in the world. Musk had already made his impact. He had taken a risk, and he was making the system listen. As Musk left the courtroom, his legal team following behind him, he glanced around. There was no sign of celebration on his face. He wasn't looking for applause. For him, this wasn't about winning a single case. It was about making a statement, and it was clear that he had succeeded. The case wasn't over, but Musk had already proven his point. He had made the system take notice of something it had long ignored: the power of innovation and the need for the law to evolve alongside it. Whether he won or lost the case, Musk had already set something in motion, and that was enough. The courtroom was filled with a tense hush as the judge walked back into the room. The air felt heavy, thick with anticipation. It had been days since Musk had presented his legal bombshell, and everyone in the room was still processing the weight of his words. The judge had promised to reconsider, to reflect on Musk's arguments and the larger implications of the case. Now, the moment had arrived for his decision. Musk sat at the defense table, his face calm and unreadable. His legal team, equally composed, looked on attentively, though each of them could feel the weight of the moment. They had pushed boundaries, challenged the status quo, and now it was up to the judge to decide if their bold approach would pay off. The judge's hesitation had thrown everyone off. The fact that he had taken time to reflect suggested that he was seriously reconsidering how he viewed the law and Musk's case, but would he actually act on it? The judge walked back to the bench and settled into his chair, the room falling into an almost reverent silence. For a few moments, he looked over the documents in front of him, clearly reflecting on everything Musk had said. His gaze shifted from the papers to Musk, then to the courtroom audience. The sense of uncertainty had grown. No one knew which way the judge would rule. Musk had successfully sown doubt in his mind, but now the question remained: would the judge be bold enough to make a decision that would shake the foundations of legal tradition? Finally, the judge spoke, his voice steady but carrying the weight of his words. "Mr. Musk, after much consideration, I've come to a decision." A collective breath was held. Musk, his team, and even the audience waited, holding their breath as the judge paused. "The arguments you presented were not only thoughtful but reflective of a larger issue we face in modern society," the judge continued. "The law was created to guide and protect, but sometimes it lags behind progress. It's clear that, in some cases, the system does not accommodate the rapid pace of innovation that we now face." Musk remained still, his eyes locked on the judge, awaiting the ruling. His heart raced, but on the surface, he appeared as calm as ever. The judge wasn't making it easy, and the suspense was almost unbearable. "I am not prepared to rule on this case in the conventional way," the judge said, his voice ringing through the courtroom. "I believe that the outcome of this trial should be deferred, not just for further deliberation, but for a thorough review of how the law applies to modern technological advancements." The room went silent, and the weight of the judge's words settled over everyone present. Musk's legal team exchanged quick glances, the tension clear. What did this mean? The judge hadn't ruled in favor of Musk's direct defense, but he had left the door open for a larger shift in how the law could respond to technological changes. It wasn't a win, but it wasn't a loss either. The judge continued, "I will be requesting a review of the legal precedents involved in this case, with input from experts in both law and technology. This case will be a turning point for how courts view and handle issues arising from industries that change faster than the laws that govern them." The judge's decision left everyone in the room stunned. It wasn't the usual conclusion. There was no clear-cut victory or defeat. Instead, the judge had opened the door to a broader discussion, one that could have far-reaching implications for the future. For the first time, Musk had succeeded not just in defending himself, but in creating a conversation that could change the way the legal system viewed innovation. Musk leaned back in his chair, letting out a quiet breath. This wasn't the victory he had expected, but it was a victory nonetheless. By forcing the court to confront the flaws in the legal system, he had managed to start a conversation that could lead to long-term change. As the courtroom slowly emptied, Musk remained at the defense table, surrounded by his team. There were no high fives, no loud celebrations. They knew the fight wasn't over, but they had made an impact, and that impact would echo beyond the walls of the courtroom. The days following the judge's unexpected decision were filled with uncertainty, yet Musk and his legal team couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. The legal battle wasn't over, and they hadn't won the case outright, but the judge had done something that no one had expected. He had opened a door, and now it was up to the world to see if that door would be slammed shut or pushed wide open. Musk left the courtroom that day with a quiet confidence. He had been under no illusion that he would walk out with a clear victory. He had known from the start that this was never going to be just about the case. It was about something much bigger. And in a way, he had succeeded. By challenging the very foundation of the law, he had forced the system to confront its own limitations. This case had turned into something far more significant than anyone had imagined when it started. The media, always quick to pick up on the most dramatic moments, had gone wild with the news. Headlines screamed across every platform, from traditional news outlets to social media. Judge challenges Elon Musk, a turning point for tech and law. Musk forces legal system to confront innovation speed. Court case ends in unprecedented decision. Musk's battle for the future of technology. It was all anyone could talk about, and Musk had achieved what most people only dreamed of, making a statement that resonated far beyond the courtroom. But behind the headlines and the media frenzy, Musk was already thinking ahead. He had known from the beginning that this wouldn't be the final chapter in his battle with the law. The judge's decision was a call to action, a message that the legal system couldn't ignore. Musk wasn't fighting just for himself. He was fighting for a future where innovation could thrive without the constraints of outdated rules. The judge may have deferred a ruling, but the conversation had already begun, and Musk intended to keep it going. Back in his office at Tesla, Musk sat in a quiet room, reflecting on the case. His team was already at work, brainstorming ideas for the next steps. He knew the court would likely bring in experts to review the issues raised, and the conversation would extend far beyond the walls of this courtroom. There would be discussions, debates, and perhaps even public hearings about the state of the law in the age of technology. And Musk, as always, would be at the forefront of that conversation. "Think of this as just the beginning," Musk said to his legal team. "We've put the ball in motion. Now we need to make sure it keeps rolling." And roll it did. Within days, industry leaders, tech innovators, and legal experts were speaking out. Musk's challenge to the legal system had ignited a firestorm of debate. While some argued that Musk was simply trying to avoid accountability for his actions, many others saw it as a necessary conversation. Technology, they argued, was moving at a pace that the law simply couldn't keep up with. Musk wasn't the first to face this issue, but he was certainly the first to bring it into the spotlight in such a bold way. The case became a turning point, not just for Musk, but for the entire tech industry. For years, innovators had quietly navigated legal systems that often seemed unprepared for their fast-moving industries. Musk had made it impossible for anyone to ignore the issue anymore. The legal system would have to adapt, and Musk was ready to be the catalyst for that change. In the months that followed, experts were called in to offer opinions. Legal scholars and tech experts debated the future of innovation and how laws could evolve to better serve industries like space exploration, artificial intelligence, and sustainable energy. The conversations were heated, but they were happening, out in the open, where everyone could see and contribute. Musk continued to push forward with his companies, never stopping to look back at the case. His mission hadn't changed. Tesla was still on track to revolutionize the automobile industry. SpaceX was still heading to Mars, and Neuralink was still aiming to change the future of human-computer interaction. But now, Musk's fight in the courtroom had become a part of his legacy, one that extended beyond technology to the very systems that governed it. As for the judge, he spent weeks listening to expert opinions, reviewing case law, and considering the implications of Musk's arguments. He knew that whatever decision he ultimately made would be a historic one. The world would be watching. The legal system could no longer operate in a vacuum. It would have to reckon with the reality that innovation and law were no longer separate. They were intertwined. And so, the case continued to echo through the halls of the courtroom and beyond. The legal battle was far from over, but one thing was clear. Musk had accomplished what he had set out to do. He had forced the conversation about the future of law and technology, and in doing so, he had left his mark on history.